And
Okay.
Taylor, you're our last presenter, right?
Yes, I think
So
so.
Taylor, take it off.
Okay. Thank you for surviving to the end, all you people. I appreciate it. I've learned a lot, and I hope you guys have too. So thank you. Dankeschön. So I am a BCBA living in Germany. And in my area of Germany, it's not well supported. So I feel like a little bit of a pioneer. And also, if you see me in the Facebook group, I'm Taylor N on the Facebook group. It's a very small expat community, so I wanted to be able to comment in different groups in my area without families knowing it was me. So that's why I'm slightly different on Facebook. So we can go to the next slide. What I wanted to talk about, we've had so many great ideas on emotional regulation, but in my practice, there has been a handful of learners that I feel like I get to a certain point with, and then I'm stuck. These are learners that I feel like, of course, I haven't tried everything. I did learn new things today that I'm adding to my toolbox, but I feel like I tried a lot of the strategies that are listed that were talked about today. I would say we are basically a CAB 6 situation. These are learners that are highly verbal, but I can never get rid of those R1s completely. They would crop up once every 2 weeks or so, and I was noticing this pattern of, it seemed to be like it was really based on internalized rule governed behaviors that my learners had. And it wasn't always the same. I've seen it divided. The handful of learners I've had, it's basically in two profiles. One is a learner that seems to have a high sense of justice. They might, to use mentalistic terms, carry a grudge, things like that. So they would show up 3 weeks later and be like, remember that time when you didn't let me do that? Well, I'm still mad about it. Like they were tacting this to me. Or on the other side, I had learners that were so internalized that they needed to obey every adult in their life that they would just kind of build up and build up and build up. And I didn't realize, because they were so good at this people-pleasing behavior, that I wouldn't see any precursors until I got an explosion of an R1 behavior. And so this is when I started to look into AIM. As maybe a supplement to what I was doing in SBT. Now, I, if you will, grew up in the field in ACT. My grad school advisor was Dixon, Mark Dixon, who did PEAK and AIM actually, but when I worked with him, he wasn't doing anything in autism. We were just working on gambling addiction, but he was still very interested in relational frame theory and acceptance and commitment therapy. So I was doing therapy for adults, ACT therapy for adults addicted to gambling in graduate school. So I mention this just because I feel like sometimes in our field, people think they can just jump into ACT with the training they received in graduate school. And unless you had a very specific kind of grad school, I feel like that it's not the case, that it's not intuitive, that you really need to get some training specific on ACT so that you are making sure that you're understanding what to do. And I'm by no means perfect, but I have attended boot camps. I've had personal conversations with Steve Hayes about ACT. Because I went to grad school 15 years ago, and so I was involved in some of those first conversations as it was starting, just thankfully because I picked the right grad school. So I feel lucky about that. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to do a general overview, but you need training. This isn't something you can just buy the book. Even though it's a really well-designed book, I would recommend supplemental training in ACT in specific. Okay, next slide, Annie. Okay, so ACT is all based on the idea of developing psychological flexibility, and there's 6 targets that they're shooting for. Now, this is from the AIM curriculum book, And it's a lot more simplified than other language you might see describing ACT because it's made for kids. So we talk about acceptance. It's just be okay with what happened, basically. Present moment awareness, try to be here in the present moment. That's all I'm telling the kids at this point. Values, what is important to you? What is important to the learners? And the piece that I love that I've taken with me since incorporating ACT into my practice is once I started discussing values with the learners, many kids have no idea. They'll say, I don't know, Pokemon, you know, and you really have to like do some detective work. But it made me realize I need to incorporate these children and their goals into the treatment plans from the beginning. So as I'm talking to the learners about their values and what's important to them, I'm making notes and I'm saying, okay, maybe we can add memorizing Pokemons to the treatment plan. Like if this is something that's really important to you, let's include it. This is a goal we can work on in therapy. Now, obviously I'm making a kid version of the treatment plan, but I'm having the kids sign it. I'm talking to their parents that we are going to target these things that that's important to your kid. So the next thing is committed action, which is not giving up on your goals. You say this is important to you, let's stick to it. And then self as context, which is one of the trickier ones to think about. When I'm talking to kids, I just describe it as being the real you, that you are separate from your thoughts. You exist just as you. And then diffusion, which is one of my favorite ones that I actually use all the time in my daily life, because I think like most people who love ACT, it comes from a place of having a lot of our own personal anxiety that ACT is helping us with. So diffusion just means stepping back from your thoughts and recognizing that distance, that you don't have to believe everything you think and that everything you think is not important or true. Okay, next slide, Penny. So AIM is basically, they're combining, they like to say mindfulness, ACT, and behavior analysis, but basically it's combining daily ACT lessons with a token economy. So instead of rewarding a kid for on-task behavior or completing things, you are giving them points for showing these ACT values of psychological flexibility. It was designed for use in classrooms. So, and we'll talk about it a little bit. I've basically been half and half on whether I use the points component with my children. Some of the kids don't need it. It doesn't add value to them, so why add that support? But I have had kids who were very motivated by those points. And so I'm going to meet them where they are. So this is just an example that they talk about how the behavior analysis, this is again from the AIM site, is the antecedent, behavior, and consequence, and they're adding the ACT component to it. So as an example, so the antecedent might be the kid, their red marker is out of ink and they really wanted that red marker, right? So you might, as a clinician, notice that they wanted that red marker, that they really are feeling inflexible about that red marker. And so when you watch their behavior, you might say, oh, I can tell you really wanted that red marker, but how can we be flexible? What can we do? And really help that child kind of choose a way, and you can use the ACT terms of like distancing themselves from that feeling that it has to be the red marker or nothing, and then complimenting them on sticking to their values. So for example, I might say, wow, the red marker wasn't available. Last time when that happened, you were so frustrated, you ripped up your paper, which actually isn't helping your values of learning to be an artist. So I'm so impressed that this time you just chose pink instead of red. That was really working towards what's important to you. So you're really trying to frame their behaviors in the ACT matrix, if you will. Okay, next slide. So we talked about this a little bit. So there's a daily mindful practice, daily ACT lessons, and then you can use the points or not, just like a token economy. Like I said before, had a learner who points really was annoying to him. He didn't need points. He was a super internally motivated kid. The idea of needing points for behaving was insulting. I've had other kids that are more like me that are very externally motivated. The points were exciting and fun for them, and it made it more like a game, and they were much more engaged in therapy after we added the points. So you know your learner best. I even did this crazy thing where sometimes I let the learner earn points to purchase his way sometimes. So I would say, oh, sorry, you don't get your way. And he'd be like, I have the points, I'm gonna purchase it. And he loved that little added bit of control. Okay, so this is an ACT example that I came up with. I'm sure it was inspired by something, but it's been years. And I actually hired an artist friend of mine to make these graphics for me. So it was really trying to, and I can post the link let me do that while I'm thinking about it. Post the link to her Etsy shop in the chat if you're interested. So I was really trying to help the learners, because ACT is all about accepting your emotions, not trying to like get rid of them. So we were talking about the emotions you have are just like on the bus, but you're the driver, you're in charge. Sometimes anger might get really loud, but you are the one that's in charge. So if you want to go to the next slide, Penny. So as an initial activity, we all colored the different emotions. The policeman is like the sense of like fairness, like you broke a rule. So many of my kids get really upset about perceived rule breaking. The guy in the hoodie is sad. And then we personalize this little guy to look like ourselves. So I laminate the bus, cut out the window so we can put different emotions in the bus. And this really like resonated with the learners. And then what I started doing is when the learners came, we would get out our bus and I would say, okay, what emotions are the loudest on your bus right now? And it became this beautiful way to check in with my learners about how they were feeling emotionally before we even started the session. So they'd sit down and be like, well, tired's on the bus because I didn't sleep well. That's information I wouldn't have had. They'd be like, well, I'm anxious because I have a dentist appointment after school. And we would add all of these characters to the bus. And there's also positive emotions too. And I would share how I was feeling in a kid appropriate way. Well, on my bus, I have worry because one of my kids is sick and I wish I could be with them. And so we would have this back and forth and we could model what emotions were on the bus, but commit that we were going to be the ones in charge of the bus, not these emotions that were on the bus. So I found this a really powerful activity, both within session and at the beginning of every session. Okay, next slide, Penny. And then to end with the ACT, the aim comes with something, and this is available for free on their website, called the Children's Psychological Flexibility Questionnaire. And it's just a way you can track changes in psychological flexibility over time. They have a parent report one too. To be honest, I don't love the parent report one. I think it's phrased weirdly and most of my parents get confused. So I often just have the parents do the child report one and be like, imagine you're your child, because the parent report one, I haven't had good luck. So you can read it for yourself, but some of the things that were really telling to me are like number 4, I had a learner, at first, if I do something bad, then I'm a bad person, right? He was like, 100%, that's true. If you do something bad, you're a bad person. And then 6 months later, when we did it again, he put that it was just a little bit true. And I felt like so successful, even if that was the only part I changed in his mind. That's huge. I don't want kids to feel like they're a bad person if they do something bad. That's not what we want at all. And so I have found this a powerful way to measure and a powerful framework. Is it for every learner? No. You really do need those like learners that can think about it. And I mean, the learners I've used it with are learners that you can tell are already really like internalizing and thinking, and you might have heard them say things like, well, I'm a bad kid, or, oh, I'm never going to be good enough. Like, you've had learners that say these things. And so I really like these ACT activities through the AIM curriculum that can help them distance themselves a little bit from those thoughts. So that is what I have to add to the emotional regulation thing. So yay, thanks everybody for coming.
Hey, thanks so much. Thank
ahead,
you so
Fanny.
much, Taylor. So, I love this. I love this chart. It's very inspiring. I think I'm going to make a data sheet. I feel a data sheet coming up. Also, apologies to everyone here. So appreciate everyone being here for the entire time. We went over time. I think we'll have to edit a little bit for our Thinkific because it's a little bit long, but the information was so valuable. Everyone had such different inputs, right? About antecedent strategies, about strategies in the moment, about data sheets, about how we do it with clients, the background of emotions. So appreciate everything.